Nellie Miller, and I'm the Director of Marketing at MPOWR Envision. We are excited to be here. We originally presented this topic as a platinum sponsor of Brightline Strategy at Work 2021 virtual event, and we received so much positive feedback about this topic and our thought leadership that we wanted to present it again to all of you. Not only is our topic overcoming barriers to digitizing your strategy really important in today's landscape of strategy implementation, it's also vital for the future of strategy design and delivery. And just like we personalize our customer success services for our customers, we want to personalize this webinar for all of you. So this is your opportunity to engage with our strategy experts and ask questions. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, share in your successes, and also understand your challenges. So please make sure to adjust your chat settings, which many of you have done, so we can all see your questions and comments as we go through today's presentation. As I said before, feel free to share your biggest challenge with this topic. What does it mean to you to digitize your strategy, and any other questions that you have? So joining me today are some wonderful colleagues that I am very lucky to work with each and every day. The first is Jeff Fairwald, our VP of Strategy Realization. In this role, Jeff is responsible for working with the entire senior leadership team to develop and guide the strategic direction of all of MPOWR's interests, as well as the interests of SupplyCorps Inc., MPOWR's sister company. Jeff has extensive experience working with for-profit and not-for-profit businesses, as well as manufacturing, distribution, and service organizations in facilitating strategy and planning. Before taking his current role here at SupplyCorps, Jeff was an assistant professor of business and the MBA director at Rockford University. Hi, Jeff.
Hi there. Good to see you,
It's
Nellie.
good. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
And thank everybody for being on this.
Yes. Andrea Gibbs is our head of strategy services. For over 2 decades, Andrea has helped facilitate planning sessions, working with clients to help create a business plan that is motivational and achievable. In addition to teaching students at the graduate business level about the importance of solid communication and team collaboration, she's a big believer in the effective culture at an organization and works with every client to understand their unique capabilities and goals. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Nellie. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Brittany Ray, our digital marketing team lead. She's a talented member of our marketing team. She knows everything digital, and we really utilize her expertise each and every day. And we really appreciate her work behind the scenes to produce our presentation. Thanks, Brittany. So Jeff and Andrea, you have worked quite a lot together. Jeff, how would you summarize your work together?
Well, I was probably a teenager when we started working together. It's been a long time. And Andrea's kind of like that sister that one additional sister that I have. We argue and we challenge each other's thoughts, but she always pushes me to do my best. So I'm really excited to be able to be here with her today.
Wow, that was really nice. Andrea, how do you respond to that?
Oh, I think the teasing back and forth, as he said it, between siblings. I would also go as far as to say, just like siblings, we can give each other a hard time, but if somebody comes from the outside, boy, do our defenses go up. So it's been a great working experience with Jeff, and I'm looking forward to today's topic and talking together about it.
Well, thank you. We all learn from you each and every day. So let's go ahead and get started. So as we think about this topic, why is it important to us and to our approach to strategy? We develop and sell strategy execution software and strategy services. Our software and services align everyone for collaboration and engagement on living flexible strategic plans. In fact, our software and services are top rated, as you can see on your screen, with all the number of badges that we have earned and continue to earn. And ultimately, when we think about it, we use technology each and every day, both personally and professionally, to make our lives and our work more convenient and efficient. And we believe technology can also give you a better way to manage strategy execution. Jeff, I know you have many thoughts on this. Would love to hear them.
Yeah, I think it's really important to reinforce the point that we strongly believe organizations will be more successful if they use a tool digitally designed for helping manage strategy execution. Organizations are wasting too much money and time on developing strategies that are poorly executed. We do believe we have a great tool that can assist in this. However, If you choose to use another tool, that's also fine. The key here is what you really want to be doing is moving your organization along towards digitalization, your strategy, so that you have a better chance of succeeding at executing your strategy. The costs are simply too high to keep trying to execute strategy poorly.
And Andrea, it's not just about our software, but it's also about how we pair our customer success services with our software to help people. Isn't that right?
Yes, I believe that it's important not only to understand and in our department, not only to understand the software, but how do you use it? How do you leverage its strengths to be able to manage and lead your organization toward the final outcome, which is to achieve your strategic goals? So we are very, very honored and humbled by our best support badge we got from G2 this fall. 100% of our users are excited about our support services. So we're very excited about that, and we want to keep doing a great job by our customers. So.
Well, we appreciate all the work that you and Deanna and the team do to get that rating and to really help and serve our clients. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with today's conversation. We have a short agenda to cover. And then, as I mentioned previously, this is again time that you have with Jeff and Andrea. So as we go through today's conversation, please feel free to use the chat and ask a question or provide a feedback or even an observation that we can all speak to and answer. So the first topic we want to discuss is strategy delivery and the importance of that. Then we'll get into the barriers to digitizing strategy. Of course, there are solutions to the barriers, and we know them very well, so we will walk you through those. We have a technology checklist as you and your teams are approaching this topic. What can you look for in software and technology to help you better manage your strategy execution? And then last but not least, we have additional helpful resources that you can also bring back to your teams after today's conversation. So if you haven't yet reviewed Brightline guiding principles, and I should probably pause and just say that the Brightline initiative is someone that we really respect for their thought leadership. We're very proud to be a partner with Brightline for the last several years. They are the strategy and strategy execution side of the Project Management Institute. And their thought leadership and their thinking on strategy and strategy execution really aligns with ours. And so we wanted to bring to your attention their 10 guiding principles. And if you haven't looked at those up, we certainly encourage you to do that because they really bridge the gap between strategy design and delivery. And the first one in particular really sets the tone for our conversation today. So Jeff, I want to start with you, and we can speak about how does the principle of acknowledging that strategy design delivery is just as important as strategy design. How does that principle connect to our topic today?
I think people need to ask themselves a question. Would you rather have a great strategy that you don't execute well, or a good strategy that's fully executed and successfully executed? I think most people would choose the good strategy fully and successfully executed. In today's world, that's really hard to do without digitalization. And I would say that having a strategy in an Excel spreadsheet is not really digitalization. Trying to use a tool that wasn't designed for strategy execution is really not a good way to digitalize. You need to have your strategy come alive. You need to be able to have the strategy be able to be created and executed visibly. The strategy needs to be able to be updated, and those updates need to be shared in real time. And we need to be able to measure those sorts of things. We spend all this time and effort to develop strategies. We hire consultants, we hold retreats, and then we don't look at them until a quarterly review. This leads to a lot of cynicism in organizations. It leads to people feeling that they're just wasting their time, and it leads to a lack of buy-in, which makes strategy delivery almost impossible.
We often talk about those quarterly reviews as quarterly fire drills.
Yep.
What do we mean by that, and why is that so problematic?
Well, if you think about it, in a lot of cases, you have your senior leaders who develop this strategy, and it's like they wrote the strategy on the tablets, and they come down the mountain and say, "Here, now go execute." And then people say, yeah, and they get busy with their regular job, and they go back to what they were really doing. And then the end of a quarter comes along, and all of a sudden your boss is going, "So where are we at on all these things? So everybody drops everything for 3 or 4 days to gather data, to gather information, to show that they've been doing something, even if they haven't. And that's that fire drill. And then they go back to, I got that done. Then they go back to their regular job. The strategy is disconnected from their daily work.
So really focusing on strategy delivery can help move you from those quarterly fire drills, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we know that organizations struggle to execute. We hear it, each and every day. In fact, between 59 to 67% of leaders say they struggle to execute their strategic goals. Andrea, what's your take on this statistic?
Nellie, I'm surprised it's that low. I've seen actually higher numbers,
Okay.
and I think it's really accurate based on the clients that I've worked with. There were a few that executed, and one of the first things, first of all, I was fortunate enough to have clients that asked me back, and when I did go back, I would say, well, now that you've gone through your cycle, and that's when strategy plans used to go for 2 to 3 years. Now that you've gone through your cycle, and we're about to get into a new cycle, how much of your old cycle did you achieve? How much of that strategy did you achieve? And it was shocking the number of people either didn't know and had to, as Jeff said, engage in a fire drill, or knew and said, well, that one didn't really work, or this didn't really happen, or we're not totally sure, mostly because they either didn't put measurements on it and they didn't track it. And so not everything has to have a number, but everything should be able to be measurable enough to be able to see progress toward it. And so, yeah, I would, based on my experience, this is absolutely true.
And I notice Rodney has chimed in. Thank you, Rodney, for your comment that this is very true as we're talking about the struggles with execution and the quarterly fire drills. And if anybody else has any other comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And while you're thinking about that, we want to actually ask a question of all of you. We're going to take a quick poll. So it's going to come up on your screen into a separate window. And the question we're asking is the delivery of your strategy completely digitized? There are 4 options to answer. The first is yes, it's completely digitized. The second is almost there. Third, started but haven't finished. And the fourth, haven't thought about it. So we'll wait just a moment as you all take the poll, and then we'll share the results.
We need Jeopardy music.
Go ahead, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Brittany, for giving us the results. So 11% have answered yes, it's completely digitized. 26 answered almost there.
Excellent.
47% started but haven't finished, and 16% answered haven't thought about it. So the majority of our audience, thank you again for answering our poll, have started but haven't finished. Jeff, any reactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of organizations, it is something that has been started. They've been trying to do it, but I think in some cases it becomes difficult because they don't have the right tool to be able to do the digitalization. A lot of times people try to cram their strategy into a project management tool that really wasn't designed for strategy execution. Other times they may use their ERP system or whatever. And that makes it a little more difficult because it really isn't designed to do what you're trying to do.
Andrea, any additional thoughts?
Well, if I add up the first 2, that's 37%, which is pretty exciting. That's my first thought. It really, that's very exciting. I think the started but haven't finished it doesn't surprise me that it's common. I think what happens with a lot of organizations, and we've seen this with some of our clients and prospects, is that they get pushback when they try to introduce a digitization into their strategy. They get pushback from their teams because, oh my gosh, it's another platform to learn. Oh my gosh, there's another thing to be able. How much time are we going to take to do that? Those kinds of objections happen. And to Jeff's point at the very beginning, I kind of circle back. You can't afford not to. And once people get into I would say the flow of being able to do something like this, I think the better off the organization will be. None of us knew that there were apps out there, for example, or software platforms to tell us what good restaurants were available and who was the best plumber in the area. We've all learned to use brand new tools to do things that we used to do manually, and strategy is no different.
Well said. And we want to congratulate the 37% that either are completely digital or almost there. That's great, great number. And we, again, would love to hear about your experiences in the chat today.
And encourage the people that haven't thought about it too. Let's not forget those people. That's also something that a lot of people are experiencing, and it takes time and a good partner.
Yep, and we can certainly be that partner, and we also have some resources that you can take back right to your teams right after today to get that conversation going. So we're going to go ahead and move on, and when we think about, as we speak to the leaders who struggle and to organizations who just struggle with the idea of strategy execution, we're often asked, where do you start? How do you even start to digitize your strategy? So Jeff, how do you even begin to have this conversation?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you start by having a strategy that's up to date and reflects your current situation. Digitalization won't be beneficial if your strategy is wrong or bad. And it's still a garbage in, garbage out. Digitalization will make the strategy faster, but not any better. Then we need to think about what it takes to make it a really, truly living, accepted and adopted strategy that you can execute well. You'll need to be, in order to do this, you need to have the strategy that's regularly visible to those who are tasked with executing it. You need a strategy that is easily shared. You need to have a strategy that can be updated in real time, and that those updates can be shared. And then you need to be able to do this in today's environment, which for most of us is a lot more dispersed than it used to be. It's harder to pull people together today into the same room. And so finally, you need a digital tool that'll help support all these things.
And we know digitizing the delivery of your strategy can also impact future strategy. Andrea, what do we mean by this?
Well, I think what you're speaking with and thinking about here is how do you once it becomes part of the culture, and as you know, that's kind of one of my exciting one of the things I get excited about. Once it becomes part of the culture, it continues. It just builds on itself, because now you've got a cloud-based platform where all of your strategy movements live. And so it becomes kind of a single source of truth, and you can just then recreate the strategy every time you decide to make a new change, or every time you decide, okay, it's the end of the year, we're putting together strategy for next year or farther in the future. You've got that what we call the single source of truth out there in the cloud, where you can see the progress people have made over the past 12 months or 24. And it's easier to be able to shift and pivot from there.
We actually have a question from Rodney. So does the strategy need to be digital first, based on what Jeff has said? Does it require a rewriting or reorganizing of the strategy, or is it a good strategy, a good strategy, whether digital or on paper?
I think a good strategy can be good whether it's digital or on paper. It's just harder to execute if it's just on paper, because you don't have the same transparency and visibility. And I don't think you should have to change your strategy to digitize it. If you do, you're probably not using the right tool. You should be able to use a tool that's flexible enough to take the strategy to meet your strategy where it is, so that you're able to be able to execute effectively. So no, I think a good strategy stands on its own, and I think that sometimes people don't have a good strategy and then they cram it into a tool and then they blame the tool, where you need to spend some time working on the strategy.
And so then Nick has also added, we are almost there, and the implementation process has increased engagement and needed to refine components of a realistic strategy. So it sounds like from Nick's experience, certainly the almost there process of digitizing has really added value to the strategy. Any other thoughts from either of you on that?
Well, I think, to Jeff's point, you don't necessarily have to create the strategy digitally. I need more coffee, apparently. Um, but once you begin to go down that path, it's so much easier to make the small shifts and pivots that you need to, because it's out there for everyone to see. And when you slightly tweak something or maybe change it entirely, it's real time.
Mhm.
Yep.
So
And everybody sees
everybody
it.
knows about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So you don't have somebody who's working on something that's no longer a part of the strategy, which I've been in an organization where that's happened. Someone's working all the time on something, and then they find out that that was no longer part of the strategy, but no one told them.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's really that alignment, which we've mentioned and
Yep.
we'll get to a little bit later too. And then Nick has just added definitely improves focus, which we love hearing that as well. We're going to ask another poll question of all of you, our second and final poll question. We would like to know, is your role responsible for digitizing strategy? So the options include, yes, I'm 100% responsible. The second option, I am part of a team that is responsible. The third, I am a consultant who helps others digitize strategy. And the fourth, I don't have any responsibility. So we'll go ahead and wait as you all take this poll question.
It looks like there was another question too from
Yes.
Margaret.
We'll just give it another moment and then we'll get to Margaret's comment.
Okay.
Okay, we have 6% of our audience is 100% responsible, 59% are part of a team that is responsible, 24% are consultants who help others digitize strategy, and 12% I don't have any responsibility. Andrea, any thoughts on these?
Well, I think the number, the 59%, I'm part of a team that's responsible. That's consistent with not only what we've seen, but also consistent with the culture of the marketplace. People aren't, as Jeff said in the beginning, people aren't, the executive team and the leadership isn't going into a retreat for a day and a half, coming out with the engraved tablets and going, here you go, here you are. And not involving the people that are actually part of execution. Organizations can't afford to do that really anymore. And so it is part of a team that is responsible. And that's not only new, it's very encouraging.
And I'd like to, Nellie, talk about the consultants. I think that many people use consultants to develop their strategy. But in the past, me as a consultant, I was always frustrated because you'd help the organization develop the strategy, and then you'd kind of disappear for a couple of years or so, and you'd come back, or maybe you wouldn't come back because the strategy didn't work and they blamed you. The nice thing is if the strategy is digitized, easy for me to say, what you can do is, as a consultant, you can keep engaged with the strategy process and you can help encourage people along as you go. And I think that that's a real benefit for consultants, in that you can really keep connected with your clients over the long run, which from a consulting perspective means that you're going to have more of that reoccurring revenue. So I think that that's a big help for consultants.
I can say personally, from my perspective, I would never go back to a spreadsheet or PowerPoint or document-based delivery of the strategy plan. It's flexible. It disperses information. It gives everyone direction in real time, and it's just a shift change. When we first started doing this kind of thing, big Post-it notes all over the room were a big deal, and then it was whiteboards, and then it was whiteboards with copy machines. So every sort of 3 or 4 years, there's something new that comes along, but this is a game changer.
Wait a minute, Andrea, didn't you start when people were just using chalk on a blackboard and that's all there was?
Yeah. And people carried clubs to the meetings.
That's right.
They just learned how to work with fire and yes, all of that.
Yep.
So remember when they said they kind of act like siblings? Here's a good example of that. I love
Jeff
it.
is taking a swing at my age, so I gotta punch back.
Absolutely. Jeff, if you could comment on Margaret's comment as far as needing to bring people on board with strategy by collaborating and finding them useful in certain points. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think she's absolutely right. I mean, people need to see themselves in the strategy, and they need to understand that their collaboration is real. I haven't read the book, but I read the review of the book, Strategy and Magazine, I think it was McKinsey. One of them just had the 10 best strategy books of the year. And one of their best strategy book was a book about an organization that opened up their entire strategy process to everybody. When they went to their original strategy planning retreat, they put it live stream for their entire company.
Wow.
And they had people in there in a chat putting information back and forth and all. And as they went along, they kept people involved because their argument was everybody has a role in strategy. And I think that's true. Sometimes we look and we say, well, this person is a line worker. What do they care about the strategy? They care a lot. People want to know why they're working for a company and what it means, especially in today's world of free agents. And so being able to connect to the strategy and see it and be able to bring them on board, I think is a huge game changer for people.
Mm-hmm.
And the collaboration has kind of changed very drastically, very quickly, right, Andrea, with work from home, the times that we are living in right now, and certainly more globally dispersed organizations as far as how to collaborate. You need to rethink that, right?
Well, again, totally need to rethink it. Can you imagine if it was a single document somewhere that people had in their homes in a drawer, and they pulled it out and realized after talking to the team 3 months later that 2/3 of the document was irrelevant or was already accomplished and people had moved on to something else. It's having it real time, having it dispersed throughout the organization. And what I think is really important is having people see specifically my job, the way I contribute to achieving the strategy is X. I think it's really, really important. And a lot of times when we work with our clients, we will take their strategy to a certain level, perhaps with leadership, and then leadership goes to the rest of the organization while they're communicating the strategy and saying, now you are the ones that will be responsible for setting the goals, setting the initiatives, asking teammates and team members who you want to collaborate with. It's your responsibility because you're the ones that are accomplishing the initiatives.
Well, thank you for those reactions, and thank you to all of you for providing some great comments in the chat. Please feel free to keep them coming. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into the heart of our conversation today, the barriers to digitizing your strategy. We know sometimes people can get overwhelmed with the idea of digitizing strategy. Bringing technology does present some challenges, and we've identified the most common challenges that we see. So let's go ahead and go through them. So we'll start with number one, lack of leadership. And Jeff, please explain this one for us.
Sure. In a lot of organizations, or many organizations, leaders are reluctant to support digitalization. They don't see the value. They say, well, they'll spend thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on a retreat to develop strategy, but then they won't invest in the execution. What they'll do sometimes is they'll come back again and they'll say, do this. Well, that's not leadership. That's kind of drive-by management. They don't understand the huge impact on the organization of the quarterly fire drills or the cynicism, as I mentioned before, that develops when people look and go, where did they come up with this? They simply don't put the resources or their support behind what can positively impact the delivery the most.
We call that seagull management, Jeff. You kind of fly over and...
Yep. That's another way to put it. Yeah.
Well, I know you've mentioned this before and may mention it again today, but that cost of cynicism can be it's very powerful, and we mitigate a lot of costs, right?
I can't tell you how many organizations I've been to, and if you get down one level or two levels in the organization, you talk to people, they're just cynical. And those are the people that are going to be leaving your organization or going somewhere else because they've seen it. Oh, this is another plan. We're going to put a lot of time, and then 6 months from now we're going to forget all about it.
Mm-hmm. So Andrea, let's look at number 2, no culture of execution. What does this mean?
Well, I think, as we've seen in many examples, not only of the more high profile companies about leadership setting culture, but the leadership sets the culture, but it has to be set against a backdrop of, if you're going to do this kind of digitization of your strategy and cascade it down throughout the organization, it has to be against a backdrop of receptive management. So rather than using a strategy platform, because there's a great deal of transparency here, everybody's seeing what everyone else is doing. And so leadership has to have a culture where where people have room to fail, where they have the ability to ask questions and challenge what's happening. And if when they ask the question, the response is, well, we're not quite sure, or I'm not sure that this is a good idea anymore, leadership has to be able to endorse a shift and say, we took a look at this initiative. It didn't make any sense for even the short term, let alone the long term. We're going to shift and refocus our efforts. And the ability to take in new data and say, we've seen these things happen. We need to adjust what it is that we're doing. And when leadership does those things, when leadership gives people the room to fail, gives people the ability to ask questions, and gives people the analytical authority to look at data and say, this is the wrong direction. We need to move in another direction. That is modeling the behavior of strategy execution within the culture.
Well, we always appreciate your insight on the idea of a culture of strategy execution. So if anybody has any questions, this is your time with Andrea and Jeff. Andrea has provided a lot of great thoughts for us as we help others get towards that culture of execution. So Andrea, I want to stay with you and move on to 3, no champion. It's something we see with organizations both large and small. And what is this barrier getting at?
Well, I think what typically happens, especially if digitization is a new initiative within your organization, you can't just have 1 or 2 people saying we're going to do this. There has to be what I call, from the leadership team. The leadership team, first of all, has to be united. And then after that, they have to be able to get what I would call lieutenants within the organization. Because they can't be everywhere, and they can't always be asking people what's happening where you are, or how are people taking to the strategy platform, and are we getting engagement with it. You'll struggle if you don't have the people that will help you accomplish that. So what I call lieutenants, which are people who are throughout the organization, who people pay attention to. They're the modelers of good behavior. They're the cheerleaders. They're the ones people are receptive to. And you can find those people easily by saying, well, you can hear people say things like, oh, have you ever worked for X? Oh, wow, I was on that person's team and it was great. We got so much accomplished. Those are the people you're looking for. Those are the people you want to bring on to be part of your champions and your cheerleaders, to be able to cascade this throughout the organization.
And Andrea, the barriers number 2 and 3 really connect. There's a strong connection between them, right?
Absolutely. It's somebody that's the champion carries the culture with them, and the champion is a part of the team that says, we're going to accomplish this and we're going to do it together. So yes, they are intertwined. Absolutely.
Before we move on to our last barrier, I invite any of you to just drop in the chat if you agree with some of these barriers, or maybe you've seen some other barriers that we don't have on your screen. We can certainly talk about them. But Jeff, number 4, cost, IT support, and infrastructure. Why is this a barrier?
Well, this is actually the easiest barrier that people can throw up. If they really don't want to do something, oh, it's going to cost too much, it's going to tax our IT folks, and we're already overburdened and we're limiting our resources there. We don't
How
have the
much
infrastructure.
time?
Yeah.
Yeah, how much time will it take?
Yeah, all that. And what happens is so that's the barrier that people really throw up if they're just going to be a little bit resistant to change.
Mhm.
What I tend to think about, though, is you can pay us now or you can pay us later, or you can pay yourself now or later. If you say, yeah, those are the barriers, we can't do it, that's great, but your strategy is probably not going to be well executed. And that has a cost. We actually have a calculator on our Envision website that helps you be able to calculate the cost, depending on the size of your organization and the number of people you have, of poorly executing your strategy. And people spend a lot of time, they'll say, oh, it's going to take too much time. If you got the right tool and it's designed for what you're trying to do, it doesn't really take that much time to be able to do this.
Mhm.
And again, it actually will save you more time than those quarterly fire drills. And if it's done right, and if it's a cloud-based product, then you're probably not going to impact your IT resources a lot. So again, in my opinion, designing a strategy is the easiest part. There is a cost to digitalization. I'm not going to say there's not, but there's also a huge cost to poor execution.
Andre, let's go back to the barriers that you spoke about. Rodney has asked a question. Can you make a distinction between leadership and champion? Doesn't it have to be championed by the leadership within the organization? At least when it's first introduced and organizations are now trying to transition to this new type of strategy execution. What's your answer to
Absolutely. Rodney is spot on. It does have to be championed by the leadership. It not only has to be championed by them, it has to be introduced by them, but they need help. And so they need to understand within their organization who are the people that are going to be working with their teams on a daily and weekly basis saying, hey, have you gotten into the platform? Have you added your KPIs? Oh, yeah, that's right. I was going to do that this week. So they need people to help keep the buzz going. And that's what I meant by a champion. But Rodney's very, very right in that the leadership has to start there, and it has to be unified. If it's 2 of 6 leaders who are excited and the other 4 are saying, I know it's a pet project of somebody's, I'm not sure why we're doing it. You don't have alignment within the leadership, and you do absolutely need that leadership alignment. But once they are aligned, getting other people throughout the organization to help support basically throughout the organization, the digitization is critical.
And there is a little bit of change management goes on, and that's what we're talking about. I'm sure many people are familiar with John Cotter's book on change. It's one of the classic books, and it's a good place to look at and remind yourself about some of the things you need to be able to do to help be that champion of change. But I agree with Andrea. You've got to look for other champions at different levels.
Nick has shared that he agrees with one change champion or a team of champions to drive the change and stamp out or overcome resistance led by management. Jeff, want to get your take on his second comment. There may be other, quote, fear of IT more generally from the older generation.
Yeah, I laughed at that because I remember the first time I was involved with a change that dealt with IT, and this is going to show my age. We were moving from a manual system to a CRM system, and I had to train people on how to use the system, and it was all mouse-based. And I had a bunch of people that had never used a mouse in their life, and I had them playing solitaire on their computer to learn how to use a mouse to be able to then use the system. So you're right, there is some of that out there. But again, like if you have the right type of system, you really don't even have to, in some cases, interact with it that much. Our tool, you get daily or weekly updates about what was going on in the strategy in an email. I think most people are used to reading emails today. And so there are ways that you can interact, again, if the tool isn't difficult. If the tool is you've got to spend weeks learning it or weeks trying to understand it, then I agree with Nick, you're gonna have that problem.
Yeah, the power of MPOWR Envision is you sometimes don't even have to log in. The information comes to you where you're at.
Yes,
when you
on
need
your
it.
phone, yeah, anywhere.
Camille has also added a comment. Other barriers are organizational standards and regulations and policies. Jeff, I'll stay with you on this one. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. I mean, depending on your organization, you may have you may have barriers that are tied to confidentiality and other sorts of things. You may have policies for how people work, and again, at that point, you need to be able to work with your team to see if some of these can be overcome. Can whatever you're going to use integrate with some of your other systems that you have, so that you don't have some of those standards and regulations. You also may not be able to share everything transparently because there may be some, again, regulations and policies. So does the system you're using allow you to have different levels of confidentiality in it so you can get around some of those things? So again, you have to be able to make sure that the system can meet the needs that you have. And those are really some of the questions you should be asking when you're looking for systems.
Yes, and we'll get to some more of those questions to ask in just a bit. So the good news is there's solutions to the barriers that we have discussed here today. So let's talk about them. Jeff, let's go back to number one, the solution for lack of leadership, embracing organizational execution. What does this mean?
Well, we've really already talked about this. I think Rodney brought up the question and it ties there. You've got to be able to lead the digitalization effort. You got to walk the talk. If you want other people to participate in that, you need to participate. You need to make sure that you're visible in the work that you're doing. You need to make sure that you have the right resources in place to help people support the digitalization. If it's just one more thing for people to do and they can't see a value to it, it's going to be tough. You also need to impress on people the importance of achieving strategy in your organization. Try something simple sometimes. I'm always amazed at this. Go around to a mid-level person in your organization or lower and go up to them and ask them, what have you done today or in the last week that's helping us reach our mission and vision? You'd be surprised at how many people just look at you and stare at you blankly. And that's
what is our mission and vision?
Right. What is it? What do you mean by that? I'm putting a nut on a bolt. I'm doing this and that's all I'm doing. In those cases, you have a real problem in that the strategy isn't being pushed through the organization. And so as a leader, you need to stress that everybody has a role in strategy execution.
And Andrea, with barrier number 2 of no culture of execution, the solution is shift behavior. Tell us more about this concept.
Well, I think, we've talked a little bit about getting champions and identifying the people in the organization who are not only enthusiastic, but who can help the leadership team make that kind of cascade throughout the organization. I think the important thing to remember is that nothing can be done overnight, especially when it comes to culture. Corporate culture, organizational culture, nothing can be done overnight. And it's important to focus on small incremental changes and to have patience. When we talk about small changes, small things that are happening, you think about making a culture shift or making a change within the organization. It's a little bit depending on what kind of change that is, especially if you're digitizing. It's a little bit like turning a battleship in a creek. It can be a challenge, and I think what you want to make sure that you do as leaders in your organization is that you begin to model what it is that you want others to see. So, and you want to lift people up who are being a part of this culture shift. You want to talk about them. You want to talk about what they did. You want to talk about the things as leaders that you've done that have failed and what you did to shift and pivot and learn from that failure and move forward. So I think leadership has a very important role here to be able to model the behavior that they want and also to raise up people in the organization who are helping make that shift and say, this is what this person did, and it made a big difference for us.
So if an organization doesn't have a champion, as our third barrier speaks to, Andrea, how can they look to purposeful governance to help?
Well, I think, there are a couple things in purposeful governance.
Easy
Boy, I
for you
still
to
need
say.
that coffee, but yeah.
Easy for you to say.
I think there's a couple of things you want to think about in this area. The first is two kinds of power, right? There's positional power and there's personal power. And in purposeful governance, you want to be using both. You do want to say, look, we're going to be using this platform. And you do want to set it as an expectation. We have it in our organization. Our president has said, you will be using this platform. It's part of our jobs. But you also—
he uses it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, but you also want to get the people that have the personal power, the people that the organization trusts, who may or may not be part of the leadership group, that are reminding the organization what the true north of the organization is. Who are those people? First of all, identify who those people are and get those people to help not only influence on a positional level, but also on a personal level. Because that's how you can make a culture change and a culture shift, is getting people not only to support you, but getting people to demand it themselves. Well, I posted in the platform. Did you see it? Or, oh, no, I didn't see it. It's in the platform. If you're looking for it, that's where it is. And so they begin to set the expectation throughout the organization in concert with the leaders.
And lastly, let's talk about the solution to the fourth barrier: affordable and cloud-based. Jeff, what do we mean by this?
Well, again, if you have a cloud-based system, you're not having to add it into what your IT team is doing and the load they're working. It's just something that people can access anywhere on their own. And so I think that becomes very important for a lot of people, especially if you are stretched with IT support, which a lot of people are today. Again, I think you have to be able to look at the hard cost versus the soft costs. There is a little bit of a hard cost for getting a solution that can help you execute strategy, but you're going to save a lot of the soft costs of a poor execution, and that far outweighs the hard cost. The time, again, can be minimal if you've got a good support team with the software you're using, because you can reach out to them and they'll help you support your strategy realization. And then finally, I know I've said this twice now, but I'll bring it up again. The cost of cynicism is just great in organizations. And again, if you do some of these other sorts of things, if it's affordable, cloud-based, you're not overstretching your IT support and all, it doesn't take a lot of infrastructure, you can really cut down on some of that cynicism.
Well, thank you for those. And I invite again our audience, if you're thinking through some of these solutions, maybe you've experienced some others, feel free to give us an observation in the chat or even ask a question. We have a few more slides to go through in our conversation today. So when we think about the solutions to each barrier that we just discussed, not surprising for us to say that strategy execution software can help. The right software will help you digitize your strategy now and for the future. But what should you look for? Jeff has alluded to a checklist of things. And so we kind of want to walk through a few of those that you can bring back to your teams and your organizations. For those of you that are really starting to think about how to use technology to manage your strategy execution. So the first one in our list is simply built for strategy. Was the software built for strategy, and is it straightforward, flexible, and adaptable to how you plan and how your organization needs to work in order to execute your plans? Jeff, we see a lot of organizations trying, you've mentioned previously, using a software that wasn't built for strategy and trying to, manage strategy execution, and it just doesn't work, does it?
No, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it just isn't. I mean, years ago, I used project management software when there was nothing else to try to do the strategy, and it was better than nothing, but not to where the softwares are today that are really just developed for strategy execution.
And so our second item in our checklist is talks about visibility and how visibility is key. Will the software give you a universal real-time view of progress? Can you see updates to your plan as they happen? And can you see the key performance indicators and metrics updated in real time? This universal view should be in one place and is ultimately one vision of truth. And it should provide leading indicators into the health of your overall strategy. Jeff, I'll stay with you on this. Any additional thoughts to what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one version of truth is what's really important along the way. I mean, if you are sharing everything and so people can see it, then they're all looking at the same thing. And as I said, I've been in organizations where someone's doing a job and it was no longer needed, but no one let them know because they didn't realize things had changed.
Yeah, that's powerful. And certainly as you have folks that come in and maybe they're being onboarded to the organization, they need to plug in right away to the strategy and where it's at. Software like ours can help with that too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So the next item, I'm going to turn to you, Andrea, because this is one of your specialties here as we talk about how we provide support to our clients. But the software is important, but having those comprehensive success services and support are just as important. And so we want to ask yourself, do you have a partner throughout your strategy journey? What are your thoughts on that, Andrea?
I think it's important not just to think about software as the software, but rather what is the kind of support that you'll have? Do you have now people knowledgeable in strategy formulation and strategy execution? Are you working with people that understand use case scenarios? You know, it's one thing to be able to, load data into a platform, but once that data is there, what do you use? How do you use it? How do you manage with it? What are the things that are important to be looking at? What are the things that are not important to be looking at? As many people know, and I've said on many occasions, strategy is as much about saying what you say no to as what you say yes to. Strategy is about making clear choices about what you will and won't do. And so having a partner there for you to be able to support those kinds of things, and also to support the engagement of your team is very critical, because as we've been talking about with culture and with moving the digitization throughout the organization, you need help, and you need a partner that's there with you and for you to be able to give you that help.
And our last item really speaks to, does the software align everyone for cross-functional collaboration and engagement on living flexible plans? This is probably one of the most important things to ask yourself and your organization as you're reviewing technology. And Andrea, how much more can we speak about the alignment piece and how important it is?
I think it's sort of everybody knows that if people are pulling in the same direction instead of two opposite directions, if everybody's moving together, it's a lot more powerful movement, and you get to do things quicker and faster than if you've got people working at cross purposes. And so I think having this kind of ability to mobilize a team, especially when we are all sitting in our offices and living rooms and wherever else we've set up our workplace or workspace, I think it's absolutely critical. So
we have a quick question from Camille. When the cloud is being used, this is viewed as a threat to the security of the organization's data. Jeff, could you respond to that? And how do we convince them otherwise? As her follow-up.
Well, I mean, I agree with her. I think what you've got to do is to talk to whoever's providing that about the security that's in place with that software, and how is it done, and can you have how are people verified that they need to be in the software and all, because there are steps that you can take to be able to create more security, but there still is that challenge. But I mean, we tend to forget that people walked around with zip drives and and could get their organizational data in that way too. And there's still other ways that people can get at the data. I think sometimes people are overly concerned about some things, but I do think you need to have that conversation with whoever is providing that software and ask them what sort of security is built in, and does that meet your needs? And
Well,
if it doesn't, then then it probably isn't the right fit.
and we're rolling out dual factor authentication soon with our
Yeah.
platform. So I think that's going to be a really important thing for us as we move forward, because we are hearing those
Yep.
questions and concerns. So dual factor authentication is going to be a really important part of a feature of our software.
Yep.
So we have a little bit of time left here before we end our conversation. Really quickly, could you each give an example of a client who has really found success with our software? Jeff, we'll start with you.
Sure. There was a organization that we worked with. Actually, I just did an ASP Chicago seminar on it. Also, Rocktown Adventures, and they were trying to get their organization aligned and work on an acquisition, and this was all happening during COVID. And so, using our platform, MPOWR Envision, they were able to deploy all the resources they needed to be able to get this acquisition done, to be able to make it work. And it's been more successful than they really even planned it to be. And right now, they're using the software to develop their plan now for how they're going to move this forward over the next 3 years. That's
great. Andrea, what about you? Tell us about one of your clients.
Oh, this is one of our earlier clients that I always get very excited about. They actually make software as well, and this particular customer uses the platform every week to run their departmental meetings. They look at what's working, what's not. They see not only that they can show others what they're doing, but others can see what they can show what they're doing, but others can see that too. And the team can then pull together and say, what can we do to help? Or if things are going a little bit south in the project, how can we pull it back and get it back on track? So it not only communicates what people are doing, it's managing towards that strategic goal. And it's really exciting to see people use the platform to really proactively manage getting to the goals that they're trying to reach.
That's great. Thank you for that. So before we end today, we just want to touch on a few helpful resources. We want to meet you where you are in your strategy journey as far as you're looking at digitization. So we have a calculator, as Jeff mentioned, on our website under resources. If you're looking to build the case for how much you're wasting with poor strategy execution, we have a new strategy digitization assessment and review. And Andrea, just real quickly, what does this assessment get to, and tell us about the review offer?
It's 7 questions that people answer that give us an idea of what might be working well in their organization and what might not be working well, and gives them an idea too, because sometimes we don't often ask the questions of ourselves. And so it's a really quick assessment. And then we encourage people, once they take it, to talk to us about what can they do to improve on the areas that they need to improve on to be able to digitize.
Great. Well, and Brittany has just put the link in the chat to connect to the assessment, and then you can schedule a time with Andrea and our team to talk more about it. Last but not least, if you are now ready to digitize, you've had those conversations, let's show you a custom demo of our software. And Brittany has also added that chat or that link in the chat so you can connect and find a time that works for you and your team, so we can give you a custom demo and show you MPOWR Envision.
Molly, there's also a question from Gail that Brittany placed in there. How can consultants work with you? We do have a consultant program where you can be a referral partner, or you can use the software and work with your clients to use it. That program is a revenue generator for you along the way. The cost of the software, it is on the website. You can go there and look. It depends on the number of users and the number of plans you have. So it's not so easy to say it costs this. You can go to the website and see those numbers. We don't try to hide that from you. And we'd be happy to talk to you about that.
Yeah, and Gail, we can certainly speak offline too and get you more information. And anyone else that has questions, we look forward to having those conversations after today. We want to leave you with one last thought. Jeff has talked about it previously today, in today's conversation about, do you have time to do something right now versus waiting to fix it later? And really the question is, how much would you save if you were able to execute effectively right now? I want to thank Brittany for all of her help behind the scenes. Thank you, Brittany. And Jeff and Andrea, thank you as always for joining us.
Yeah, I just put my email in the chat. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask me directly, please feel free to send me a note. I'm happy to answer.
That's great. And thank you, Andrea, so much.
Thank you, Nellie. I was going to put mine in the chat as well.
Okay.
Thank you
cool.
very much for including me. It was a great day.
Well,
and I've got to tell you, thank you for everybody that attended. I've been watching the numbers and people stuck with us. So
well, Jeff,
you.
You're stealing my thank you. You're stealing my yes, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much to all of you. We really enjoyed today's conversation. We look forward to the next one. Again, we'd love to keep the conversation going. So thank you for your time, and we wish you all the best of luck with your strategy execution. Have a great day.
Thank you.